Now it's time for an amazing story of how some banks wind up controlling our markets and driving up prices and totally screwing you over. That's fun. We'll show you what they do and how they do it, which is really interesting. So stay tuned for that. So it's going to start with a crazy story about aluminum. Goldman Sachs decided that they were going to buy Metro International Trade Services. They're in the aluminum business. And they were going to do something fascinating. Basically, they were going to slow down how quickly they got aluminum to the end users like the beer companies, Coca-Cola, etc. And by doing that, they would make billions of dollars. How? All right, let me explain. So first of all, when they bought them, there was about 50,000 tons of aluminum in 2008 that they stored. This company did, right? By 2010, they had made that 850,000 tons, and now it's 1.5 million tons. Now, why are they bothering to store so much aluminum, and how? Well, it turns out the more aluminum that they have access to, the more they can control the markets. And in fact, they give incentives for people to store the aluminum in their warehouses up to $230 extra per ton. So people go, okay, fine, take my aluminum. But they're losing money with those incentives. How are they going to make it up? Well, this is how they're going to make it up. They have 27 industrial warehouses in the Detroit area, and they move about 1,500 pound bars of metal each day. But they don't move them from the warehouses to the end user. No, they move them warehouse to warehouse to warehouse. They keep moving in between those 27 warehouses. And guys that work in the area, interviewed by the New York Times, they say, look, we suit up, it's a job, man, but we say hi to each other on the way to the warehouses, and then we go back, and we're going in circles and circles and circles. So what's the result of that? 3 years ago, before Goldman Sachs had bought this company, the amount of time that it took for someone who had bought aluminum to actually receive their shipment was 6 weeks. Okay, that makes sense. Today, it's a 16-month wait. 16 months. So why? Well, it turns out that when you, of course, no one's surprised by this, artificially decrease the supply of aluminum in the market, what happens? The price goes up. Now, it only goes up by a little bit. It goes up by 1/10 of a cent. 1/10 of a cent for every aluminum can's purchase price? Now, that doesn't seem like much and often goes unnoticed, except, of course, for the bottom line of Goldman Sachs. So how many cans does it affect? 90 million aluminum cans are used each year in the U.S. But cans are not the only things that use aluminum. There are tons of aluminums used in cars, electronics, house siding, etc. So the additional cost to the consumers because of that 1/10 of 1 cent in each can, for example, is $2 for every 35 pounds of aluminum used to make 1,000 cans. But this is interesting. For every car, there is an additional $12 cost that was not there before because of the aluminum used in the car. They already had aluminum price in the car. This is $12 extra on top of that because Goldman Sachs slowed down the shipping of aluminum. Just 1/10 of a cent per can makes a giant difference. How much of a difference? In the end, over these last 3 years that Goldman Sachs has been just running that company, that all they do is store that aluminum, $5 billion they made over the last 3 years from just this scam. $5 billion. That's $5 billion extra all of us paid to them for no reason. The price of aluminum was not actually higher in terms of the production costs. There's no reason why you should have paid that. Just, oh, sorry, we can't get the aluminum to you. You're going to have to pay a little more. So even the managing director at Harbor Aluminum Intelligence, and I'm amused that there's such a company, says it's a totally artificial cost. It's a drag on the economy, and everyone pays for it. So that's not the only way they made money out of this interesting way. And I keep calling it a scam because it is. It's not, oh, they had to do it because of production costs. It's a decision they artificially made to screw you out of money. But it's not illegal. That's the funny part. Not illegal. We'll show you how they did it in a second. But on top of that, not only did they make money by increasing the price of aluminum, they also, since they're banks, bet on the commodities market. But they have their information because they're in the commodities market. And just so you know, it didn't used to be this way. They deregulated the banks and let them buy whatever they want. In the past, a bank couldn't bet on the commodities market and own a piece of the commodities market. That gives them an artificial advantage. It's basically like insider trading. Now, let me let the New York Times explain here. They say, by controlling warehouses, pipelines, and ports, banks gain valuable intelligence, market intelligence, investment analysts say. That in turn can give them an edge when trading commodities. So they make money from the extra production costs that they artificially inflated. They make money from the trading because they have the insider information on it. They just keep making money. Now, wait a minute, though. There's somebody supposed to look out for us on this, right? There's supposed to be some sort of regulation. Well, who does the regulation in this industry? It's the London Metal Exchange. So how did they get them to play ball? And this is brilliant. The London Metal Exchange, which oversees 719 warehouses around the globe, has not always been an impartial arbiter. It receives 1% of the rent collected by its warehouses worldwide, and until last year, it was owned by members including Goldman, Barclays, and Citigroup. Well, that's brilliant. They bought their regulators, and they cut them in on the deal. They say, and now whenever they go to make a regulation change, and those three banks wound up selling it to another interest, and now even that new person who runs the London Metal Exchange, or the new company, it's like, man, I don't know, man, 1% of our money is a lot of money. It's millions of dollars. If we actually do our job and we regulate them, we're going to lose that money. Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. So Nick Madden, the chief procurement officer for one of the largest aluminum purchasers, Novelis, said the situation illustrated the perils of allowing industries to regulate themselves. To which, of course, I say, we told you so. But now, finally, this is other companies, because they're also getting screwed, saying, wait a minute, we said we should regulate ourselves, not them. It turns out when the banks regulate themselves, they not only screw over the consumers, but they also screw over other companies. In fact, according to the estimates of the beer companies and other companies that make aluminum cans, they cost them $3 billion a year. So they're very unhappy about it. They're trying to get Congress to actually change the rules so that these banks are regulated. But of course, good luck to you, because as Dick Durbin once famously said, and he's the second Democrat in leadership on the Senate side, the banks frankly run this place. They own Capitol Hill. So it's not just an aluminum, it's just a wonderful example. The reality is the banks are now in these markets and do speculation on these markets: oil, wheat, cotton, coffee, and also copper. I'll get to copper in a second. But the most damaging is actually oil. Back in 2011, this is awesome because it actually comes from an internal Goldman Sachs memo. This is them admitting what they're actually doing as an industry and as part of that industry. They say that speculation accounted for 1/3 of the price of a barrel of oil. We're not just talking aluminum cans anymore. 1/3. Do you know what that means? For the average American, when you filled up your gas tank, you paid an extra $10 that you didn't have to pay. Every time you filled up, they stole $10 out of your pocket. And by the way, it's just like the aluminum scam. What they do is they buy the refineries, the warehouses, they even buy the ships that the oil are in. And the Koch brothers are part of that scam as well. So what they do is they dock the ships offshore and they won't deliver the oil. And they're like, ooh, I guess there's a limited supply of oil. Price is going to have to go up. What can we do? And then once the price goes up, they dock the ships. That's one of many examples of how they do this speculation. The prices are higher. You pay 1/3 more, $10. So how much is $10 per fill up for the year for everybody? And this is not our estimate. This is Goldman Sachs' estimate. An extra $200 billion a year they took out of your pockets based on the oil scam alone. Now there's the oil scam, there's the aluminum scam, and now there's the copper scam. J.P. Morgan, without anyone realizing it, went and made a $1.5 billion purchase in copper. In fact, just 3 banks cornered the copper market and got 80% of it. Now you think maybe they might do limited supply of copper, and then turns out the copper prices go up? We've seen this movie before, right? So it's okay, because the Securities Exchange Commission is the ones that are regulating them, so I'm sure that they won't allow this. It's an obvious monopoly type of situation, or an oligopoly, as these banks have done over and over in these different fields. So, New York Times reports, after an intensive lobbying campaign by the banks, Mary L. Shapiro, the SEC's chairwoman, approved the new copper funds last December during her final days in office. What a coincidence! And I'm sure that she will not get a job at all that somehow pays her through the banks. Whether it's a lawyer representing the banks or any old thing, or a lobbyist or directly working for the banks, I'm sure that won't happen at all. That's never happened before. By the way, the person who replaced her, Mary Jo White, where did she used to work before? At a law firm representing the banks. Gee, I wonder how this game is played. So yes, it was magically approved. And then I love this last part. SEC officials concurred with the firm's contention, disputed by some economists, that reducing the amount of copper on the market would not drive up prices. Oh, come on! Anyone who's ever taken any economics, that includes conservatives, liberals, libertarians, it doesn't matter at all what your politics is. If you have a limited supply, of course prices go up. It's an economic fact. And now the SEC says, I don't see that economic fact. I don't know what you're talking about. Go ahead, banks. Take 80% of the copper market. Have at it, Hoss. Aluminum, copper, wheat, coffee, oil, it doesn't matter. The banks run the place. And they set the rules. They set their own regulations. They hire the regulators. And in the end, we get screwed out of billions of dollars. Our system of government is completely broken and taken over by these corporatists. And by the way, in the process, they're also destroying capitalism. Because this is supposed to be a free market where we have actual competition, not oligopolies, not monopolies. Instead, this is crony capitalism where they have taken over the government, they've bought the government to give themselves an unfair advantage. So they screw over the competition, they screw over other industries, and finally they screw over the American taxpayer. If you keep letting them do it, they're going to keep taking your money.